out there in Arizona, a lot during the offseason here in Cincinnati. Right now, of course, he's down in Houston, Texas. That was always one of my favorite stops. We welcome in longtime TV analyst of the Cincinnati Reds, Chris Welsh. Good morning, young man. How are you?
What do you say, partner? Really great to be on here with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. How's Houston? Where are you guys staying now down there? Have you changed hotels from where it used to be?
No, we used to stay at the Galleria.
Yep.
And I think I calculated one time, and you're probably in the same boat, that I probably spent 3 months of my life in and out of the Galleria. Because back in the day, of course, the Reds used to travel here 3 times a year. I did it as a player, did it as a broadcaster for a long time, and we got to know that place pretty well. That was the Mall of America before the Mall of America. And but now we're staying downtown within really walking distance of the ballpark. It's great down here. It's hot and humid as it normally is in Houston. Nothing's changed there. But I love Houston. I love the people, the ballpark. The ballpark is great. You know that the sight lines from the TV and radio booths are just really great because you're almost right there with the fans. I mean, you can reach out and ask them to go get you a bag of popcorn. So it's really a fun place.
I love that ballpark. I mean, I've been there in a few years now, but I always thought that was one of the most underrated ballparks in all of baseball. It's just a cool place, and they got great fan base, and obviously they have a lot to be excited about coming off a World Series title. But look, people around these parts, Chris, I mean, you grew up here. The pride of St. Xavier High School, all the liberal elites, like my friend used to say over there. But listen, the Reds, they're the talk of the town right now. How do you see this team? You're around them every day. You know the people involved. You know the players. You know David Bell. You know the coaches. But from where you sit, what's the state of the Reds right now?
Well, if you're talking about the state of the Reds team, they're a young ball club that doesn't remember losing as much as the Reds have lost in the last 5 or 6 years. And that's the biggest thing. So there's no legacy that they're trying to rid themselves of. They're just going out and playing baseball. They look around the league and they say, hey, these teams in our division aren't that good. We're as good as they are. If we can, play with a high level of energy and believe that we can win every day and then get some decent starting pitching, we can win. And so far, that's been the case. It's been really a lot of fun to watch them.
You look at the injection of the youth, and I want to start with Matt McLean. Look, you've seen a lot of guys going back to your playing days that have been brought up, and you're nearly 30 years, I think it is now, in the Reds TV booth, and not longer than
31.
that. 31, forgive me, 31 years. I mean, you've seen some good players come up with this franchise. Some guys that have gone to the Hall of Fame come up with this franchise. Other guys who are going to go in the Hall of Fame come up with this franchise. Can you remember, though, a guy being better over a month and a half than Matt McLean has been?
No, I don't think so. I think when Jay Bruce first came up, I mean, he was really on fire. He hit the ball hard, but he also got a ton of great breaks. As far as a well-rounded player, Matt McLean takes the cake. He's basically the baseball version of a gym rat. He loves the game. He loves to be out there. He has his whole life. He is a little powerhouse. I mean, he's a guy that is a little bit bigger than Jose Altuve. He has tremendous power, really strong kid, very fast. He's got fast twitch muscles going. He's got a good arm. And I kept talking with the Reds front office during the beginning of the year saying, hey, when are you going to bring these guys up? Matt McLean, he looks like he's ready. Ellie De La Cruz, he looks like he's ready. And they kept telling me, well, McLean's, he's got to learn to do the little things. And to which I said, well, we got a bunch of guys up here over the last few years that did the little things, but they couldn't do the big things. McLean seems to be doing both. And now that he's been up here for a few weeks, he is, in my book, the best defensive player on the Reds. He does every little thing there is, whether you play him as shortstop or second base. I'm sure you could play him in the outfield, and he would not miss a step. But he's got a good eye at the plate. And I think, Thom, as you've seen baseball for a long time, that's the biggest transition that young players, batters have to make, is the selectivity of the pitches that they swing at.
The last time we had you on, Chris, was right at the end of spring training, and you had made the comment, I believe, paraphrasing here, that basically when you went out to the backfields and you'd watch these guys hit and work out and work on their defense and so on and so forth, you're like, Ellie De La Cruz is the best player on the field. The tools clearly are all there. He has had a reputation of every single level, once he starts at that level, working his way up through the minor leagues, to struggle a little bit at the beginning and then figure it out. He just goes the last 3 days in Kansas City, doesn't get a hit, doesn't mean he didn't help the team win in the 3-game sweep. But now watching De La Cruz for about 2.5, 3 weeks now, did you notice anything in Kansas City, or it was just a 3-game series where a guy didn't get a hit? Did you notice anything they were trying to do with him at the plate?
Yeah, it's interesting because when a rookie comes up as a hitter, first thing the major league pitchers try is that they want to test to see if he can hit the fastball. And he can. I mean, his first home run was a pitch up and in, almost off the plate. He's got tremendous bat speed, great reactions, and so on. So he's proven that. I think the turning point for Ellie De La Cruz was the 3rd game against the Los Angeles Dodgers when Clayton Kershaw flipped that little breaking ball up there time after time, and then he really kind of got into De La Cruz's head. And I think the same thing's kind of carried on now, especially in that Kansas City series. They weren't going to give him anything. I mean, they're pitching him down in the zone. He's got a great high ball swing. From the waist on up, you can't get the ball by him. So they're pitching him down. They're changing speeds, and it's beginning to get into his head just a little bit, looking for the off-speed pitch, because a couple of times in Kansas City, he took strike threes with fastballs basically down the middle, surprise pitches. So this is the mind game that big league pitchers and scouting reports do to young players. I mean, he's got to go up there again and do what he did in every level to adapt. And I think in his case, it's more like he should take the Ken Griffey Jr. approaches, which is, see the ball, hit the ball. Don't worry about the strategy the other team is bringing to you. Just go back to basics. And I think he's going to be fine. I mean, the kid's an immense talent. Have never seen a player with more talent than he has. And he's going to be around for a long time.
When you say never seen a player, you mean never seen a player?
Ever. I've never seen anybody who can do everything that he can do. And he may not hit as many home runs as Ken Griffey Jr. He may not steal as many bases as Ricky Henderson. He may not be a Gold Glover as shortstop the way that Barry Larkin was. But he does the combination of things and the potential for him. I was walking behind him to go into the stadium the other day, and I'm looking at this kid's build. I mean, his shoulders are the widest shoulders on anybody in the team, and then he cuts down to his waist. He looks like Andre Dawson from behind, except that he runs better than Dawson, and he's got a better arm than Dawson. So it's just uncanny. He's got a great attitude. He's not full of himself in any way. He's very humble. He works hard. He's making little adjustments with the coaching staff here that's going to help him. And, it's just fun to watch him progress every day. Don't worry about the small sample size of a series in Kansas City or a series in, against the Dodgers, whatever. Look at the big picture, because, you're going to have this kid a long time. And right now, there's nobody else in this organization, or I think in anybody else's organization, that has as good a potential as he does.
Tonight's starting pitcher, Andrew Abbott. He's made a couple of starts. He's yet to allow a run. We heard so much about him coming up through the minor leagues and the way he started this year at AAA. What has impressed you the most about this young man?
Guy's a bulldog. I mean, I heard from Sean Pender before he was called up. Actually, it was Pat Kelly, the manager of the AAA team in Louisville. And I asked him about Abbott. This is before they called him up. And I said, well, what do you really like about this kid? He said, what I like is that when the minor league pitching coach comes to him and he says, hey, I think you ought to try this with your grip or this with your release or something like that, Abbott would say, why? And he'd want to know why. He's a tough guy. He needs to be convinced. And I think that he takes that same attitude to the ball game, and he doesn't want to back down. I mean, he feels like his stuff is plenty good. He feels like he belongs here. He feels like if he makes good pitches, he's going to get hitters out. And so far, so good. So he pitches fearlessly. And from a pitching standpoint, I think what he does, which is very interesting, is that he's able to change speeds. Right now, he's controlling the outside part of the plate, first base side of the plate, with his fastball and with his changeup. And that's a pretty good place to start, because that's usually the safe zone for a pitcher to go.
No question. Okay, a couple of other topics real quick to hit. The bullpen, I believe, at last check, has thrown the third most innings among all bullpens in Major League Baseball. The starting rotation, the ERA, very, very high. They've had guys in and out. Lodolo's out. Ashcraft is out. Green, skipped a few days of a start. You got Abbott up. At the end of the day, what has to change with that rotation, or who do you think will end up stepping in there to give them a lift in the rotation? And I'm going to take Green and Abbott out of this. But where else are they going to find someone with consistency? Because I'm with you. I mean, I said yesterday, we are where we are right now, sitting here in the middle of June. And when you look at the competition in this division, there is nothing that makes me believe that the Reds don't have as good a chance as anybody and better than most to win this division. But the starting pitching's got to get better, right?
It does. I mean, you hit on the spot that I think is the most for baseball people who really understand how you put a team together. You've got to have a strong bullpen. And if you're wearing your bullpen out in the month of June, what's it going to be like on August 15th? And that's the biggest question here. I think the earned run average of the starters is high because there are certain games when there have been blowouts where David Bell has left that starter in there to suck up a lot of earned runs. And it hurts the earned run average overall, but it saves his bullpen. But in the meantime, they need arms. They need consistent arms that can stay healthy. And they need some pitchers in the rotation to go deep into games. And of course, deep nowadays is 5 and 6 innings. But the blowout games of covering 2 innings and then have to go to the bullpen, those games are what really kills the bullpen. So the only people that can really help this team from a starting standpoint is probably Nick Kroll and the front office. Because if you believe that you cannot pick the year in which you contend, that year sometimes picks you. George Grand always used to say that to me, and it really makes a lot of sense. You put your organization in the best place it can possibly be to win ball games. And now the rest of the division has come back. There's really not a great team or a full, complete team in this division at all. So I'm with you. The Reds can win this thing, but they need help. They need a starting pitcher who can give them some innings, who can stay healthy all year long to kind of pitch alongside Green. And then they also need a left-handed reliever because I don't think that you can survive the rest of the season with just Alex Young down there.
All right. Well, Nick Kroll came out the other day. He was asked about whether, the Reds are going to consider being a quote-unquote buyer at the trade deadline. Clearly, I mean, you got to wait and see what their record is and where they're going to stand. But, look, I just – and I know the schedule gets tough. But, again, getting back to what we were talking about a second ago, nothing makes me believe that in a month from now, as you're getting a lot closer to the trade deadline, that this team is not going to be within 3, 4, 5 games of that lead. Okay, now what place they sit in, remains to be seen. But you get into the whole debate, Chris, about, you've made all these deals to acquire all this young talent. They have so many promising players, not only at the big league level young players, but a lot more coming quickly. Where do you come down on the whole thing about, man, you got to consider 1 or 2 of these guys if you want to make that move? Or do you just continue to do what they've been doing, and they've done it well, and thinking, okay, with what we got this year, we'll play with what we got, and, some tweaks here, tweaks there, and not trade any of these young guys? Or would you at least be open to trading some of the young guys?
I think if you're looking at the macro view, Thom, you realize that one of the easier things to do for a front office is to take a franchise that is losing 100 games, that has a bunch of guys that are going to be paid a lot of money, and you can't see the wins from them. So you trade them away for prospects, okay, because those prospects are not going to be judged for several years from now. And the Reds have done that. I mean, when they made the trades with Seattle, when they made the trades with Minnesota, they got some pretty good players in return. They got some big league ready players like Spencer Steer in return. That has turned out to be exceptional. But, when you have that combination of players coming up through the minor leagues ready to go in the big leagues, and those players that you've got in some trades, let's face it, there are not enough spots on this ball club for all the prospects that the Reds have returned in those trades. So now the difficult time begins. Now you've got to evaluate your own players and say, okay, is Noelvi Marte better than Spencer Steer? Is Arroyo better than Nick Senzel? Is Encarnacion Strand better than, fill in the blank? Joey Votto, is Stuart Fairchild, Will Benson, whatever it is. So you've got still a whole handful of really good prospects down in the minor leagues. You didn't acquire all those prospects to play for your team. You acquired those prospects to make your organization better. So how do you do that? Well, you make the right decisions about the players that you keep, and you make the tough decisions about the players that you trade away, and you trade them at a time when their value is at the highest. And it could be a prospect that you really don't want to get rid of. But if you need a pitcher down the stretch, and if it's a guy that makes sense, maybe more than just to rent a pitcher for one season, and that you can keep them, then it's worth trading away some of these big prospects, because you just can't keep accumulating prospects and expect you to win the division. You've got to put a balanced roster together, and that's a challenge that the Reds front office faces right now.
Well, there's no doubt, and I use the quote all the time. I remember John Sherholtz, a great general manager in Atlanta, saying to me a long, long time ago, you better know your organization better than other people know your organization. And those are the very tough choices that you're talking about, tough decisions you're talking about. Were you surprised? I found it very encouraging, but your thoughts, because you're around it. Were you surprised that Encarnacion Strand just yesterday gets a start in the outfield for the first time this year?
Yeah, I'm wondering what took so long. I mean, they've been playing this kid at third base. Well, you already have, a couple of third basemen down there. I think that, all I heard all spring training was he can't play outfield. I'm saying, well, why don't you stick him out there? Because if he can hit, he can play outfield. I mean, it's always a give and take of one thing or another. Give me a guy that can play, that can really hit, and I'll make do with his defense. I mean, how long did the Reds look at Adam Dunn out in left field? And they put up with it because, he was hitting bombs every other night. So I think that's the give and take here. So I'm surprised it took so long. I think the Reds are I think the front office is a little surprised right now. I think that they're surprised how quickly that guys like McLean and De La Cruz have come along. They're surprised that Encarnacion Strand took what he did in spring training and he's picked up on it again. I think they're surprised that Spencer Steer has played so well, that they've gotten great production out of TJ Friedel, a guy that they wouldn't play last year because they were giving all of his at-bats to Aristides Aquino. So it's amazing how, I always think one of the successes in life is admit when you're wrong and move on. And I think that the front office is beginning to do that on some of the players they may have not made good decisions on in the past. Hopefully that going forward, they'll make decisions on these players soon and get them up here and play, because I think that if you're not going to go for it, and if you're not going to trade for pitching, and if you're not going to make your bullpen stronger, then get all the kids up here and play. Because if you're rebuild with the youth.
All right, well, which leads me then, Chris, to the last question I want to ask you about, because this all ties together. You all of a sudden are within days, if maybe a week, of Votto coming back up, hit his second home run in the last 5 days. He had a double and a couple of walks yesterday for Louisville. You still have Will Myers, who is due to come back up from AAA Louisville. You have Nick Senzel, who will come up from AAA Louisville. Oh, and by the way, Encarnacion Strand's on pace to hit 60 bombs down there. Much like you were talking about prospects and which ones you want to keep, which ones you might think about moving, what are you going to do with all these guys? I mean, you just can't leave Votto down there. You can't leave Myers down there, Senzel down there. What are they going to do?
I think June 22nd is the day for Votto. That's the maximum number of days on rehab. So something's got to be done between now and then. So we're running out of time there. Nick Senzel, I'm surprised he's not already here in Houston, actually. But he'll be coming up pretty soon. And then the question is, where do you play Senzel? They've gotten pretty good play all the way around the infield with Nick Senzel being gone. But he has been a really good player. I think in the long run, if you want to get specific, and this is only my opinion, I don't know. I believe that they're probably going to take a look at moving some of these players. Obviously, you can't move Joey Votto. If you can move the contract of Myers, you'll probably try to do that because you've got players that can play just about every bit as well as he can. Although the Reds did not see him really playing very well at all in the beginning of the year. So I'm going to write that part off because he's a better player than what he has shown. The Senzel thing, though, is interesting because he's a guy that is versatile. He can play in the outfield, he can play in the infield, and he crushes left-handed pitching. And there's got to be some teams out there that are in contention that are looking for a right-handed hitter that crushes left-handed pitching. And Senzel might be that guy for that. So do you package Senzel with Myers and see if you can move two players at once? Or do you package Senzel and Myers and maybe one of your really good prospects and get a bona fide pitcher in return? So these are the things that I don't know about because I don't know who's available out there. I don't know what the asking price is for a starting pitcher on the market nowadays. I don't know what the Reds are really willing to trade away. But I can tell you that the history of the Reds overall is that they've fallen in love with their own players a little bit more than they should have. And then when they go to try to trade those players, they realize that the value on the market is really not the value that they see internally. So I'm hoping that this time they look at it a little bit more practically and they start making some moves because you've got too few spaces for too many players. Usually a good thing, but in this case, it can be a problem, especially for David Bell when he's trying to find playing time and keep the energy of the team at the same level. And I can guarantee you that's one thing that he's thinking about right now is that how do I ensure that this attitude that this young ball club is playing is going to stay the same when all these players get off their rehab and come back from Louisville?
There's no doubt. Well, Chris, we can't thank you enough for your insight and for your time this morning. Enjoy Houston, Texas. I don't know if they're still serving up that fried chicken in the media room every night.
Oh.
But although you're a lean dude. I mean, you really watch what you eat, so I don't know if you're going to be digging into that fried chicken. I'd have a bib on and be knee deep in it.
I'll tell you, yeah, that was the only thing that Jeff Brantley has been talking about this whole road trip. That fried chicken. I mean, he wants to fill up his carry-on bag with that and take it with him back home. But it's the only media room in baseball that has fried chicken every day of the week, including Sunday. And it's amazing what you remember, Thom. And hey, thanks for having me on. You're a great broadcaster. You've been an incredible partner over the years to me. I wish you a lot of luck and hope I get to see you soon.
All right, brother. Enjoy Houston. Thanks for the time, buddy. Good seeing you.
You got it, buddy.
All right, man. Chris Welsh, kind enough to join us from down in Houston, Texas.